Okay, welcome to the first edition of UCCM Radio, run by the Teen RE group. I'm Walt, and go around the room.
I'm Liam.
I'm Aiden.
Emily. Linda.
Anita.
Walt Tuttle is our first guest, and we're real excited to have her here. Liam, you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, so our first question is not really a question, but if you could tell us a short synopsis of your life, tell me your story in just a few minutes.
Okay, I was born in the Midwest in Iowa. No, I was really born in Chicago, Illinois. Lived there for 5 years and then moved to Iowa. I was baptized in the German Lutheran Church. And when we moved to Iowa, there was no German Lutheran Church there. It was a Norwegian Lutheran Church, which is as different as night and day. So my folks shopped around, found a lovely Presbyterian church with a little old British minister who was just a delight. So I lived with him until I actually left home at the tender age of 22. So I was well immersed in Presbyterianism, and I always sang in the choir. Still am. So when I went off to school, I would look up a church and I would go there, and I got along pretty well. And then I went into occupational therapy and did some training. This was after I'd already gotten an art degree, and went to the local Presbyterian church. And lo and behold, the minister was one of these thumping on the pulpit saying, "You are damned, you are going to hell." And I thought, wait a minute, this isn't what I remember about Presbyterianism. And I was a little upset by that. Given a few years later, I started my family. I had a daughter and took her back to my occupational therapy department to introduce her to my supervisor, who wanted to know what I was doing. And she said, "How's life going for you?" And I said, "Everything's fine, except I can't find, I'm really upset with my church." And she said, "Well, weren't you an art major originally?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, have you ever heard of Frank Lloyd Wright?" And I said, "Oh, he's my hero. I love his work." She says, "Well," she said, "our church was designed by him. Why don't you come to church with me on Sunday morning and see what you like?" So I went for the architecture and fell in love with the people. And my daughter found that they had a sand pile in the middle of the RE room. Oh boy, beeline, I didn't have to worry about her. So that's when I joined the Unitarian Universalist Church. And from then on, wherever I went, I looked up the church, joined the choir, because I knew this was a small group that would accept me, because every choir is always looking for more singers. And so I have traversed the various cities checking out choirs and singing and getting more and more involved with Unitarianism. For a while I ran the church down in Lansing, Michigan when we were without a minister, and I was the office manager, I was the newsletter editor, I was the worship person in charge, did the whole thing for 2 years, and then they finally got a minister, a real minister. Came up through I'd done the Midwest, about 5 different states, came out to California with the love of my life, who was not the man I married and had 4 children with, but settled in San Diego. My daughter was up in San Francisco. She said, "I'm working on a project, I need your help." I said, "I'll do it long distance." So she would send things to me, bows to tie, lace to gather, stuff like this. And we worked together long distance. And then one day she said, "You know, I've moved over to Nevada City," and she said, "I really need your help more." And Sam had had a stroke 2 years before, and so I was taking care of him. And she said, "Oh, and by the way, they have a Unitarian church." And I said, okay, I'll come. So I moved up and called the Unitarian church number and talked to Louise Tuttle. And Louise said, "Well, yes, we have a church, but it isn't here. We have to travel down to Auburn." Oh, 30 minutes, 2-lane highway. And that was kind of a bummer, but I did it, and I traveled down there, and they found out how much experience I'd had running Unitarian churches, and so eventually I ended up being president down there. And when I was president, I became privy to a lot of information that everybody else doesn't know, like who actually is on your membership list and how much do they pledge. And I found out that there were a lot of people that lived up here that never showed up down in Auburn, but they sent their money down there because they wanted a liberal voice in the foothills, in the northern foothills. So for a while, SFUU South and SFUU North. And we did that, and I got to thinking, you know, those people for years have been sending money down here, supporting. We ought to do something for them. So I suggested to our board that we bring a program up once a month. It's one of our homegrown ones, because we didn't have a minister. They were traveling through, and they were gathered from here and there. And regrettably, the minister we had down there said, no, we don't. That would split the congregation. I said, I'm not talking about splitting the congregation. I'm talking about just taking a program up and giving them something for their money, so to speak. She said no in October. I brought it back. She said no in November. I brought it back. In December, the board sided with me and said, I think we should do it. So in January, we had our first meeting in the Tuttle living room, and we had about 18 people who had been on the list who were contributors. And we said, we want to do some programs up here. And they said, fine, we'll help you. And so we had a program in February, and I said, everybody bring a friend. And they brought friends, and it was a little crowded in the living room. And so in March, we went over to the Magic Theater, because Bill had a connection there. And we had our first service at the Magic Theater. And we had, I'm blocking on his name, but anyway, a local person who's still with us as our first speaker. And he was a spiritual person who could carry it off. And that was our beginning. And we had coffee hour, and we had one woman who sat out in the entryway, and if there were any kids that came, why, she gave them miniature RE classes. And from there, we moved from there to Madeline Helling Library, to the Nevada City Elementary School, to Trinity Episcopal Church in the afternoon, after we had very carefully taken the crosses down and changed the look of the building. And some of the paintings that you see downstairs were our stained glass windows that we brought in every Sunday morning and decorated with. And then one of our members who lived up on Wall Street said, hey, you know, there's this mortuary down there, and it doesn't look like it's used very often. Why don't we check and see if we can use them for a Sunday morning? And in 2000, I was the president here of the board, and we bought the building. And right now, I'm trying to stay upright so I don't break anything more after the hip and leg and so forth. And my goal right now is to be here in 2020 when we burn the mortgage. Period.
Wow, that was a wonderful story. Thanks for focusing.
It was more than 2
specifically.
or 3 minutes,
That's,
I know.
that's quite all right. Thanks for focusing on the religious part too.
Yeah.
Just want to do it.
Right. Did you envision it would be what it is today and hope for the future?
Not in detail, but coming in, it was a whole different thing because we had all of the disability things that we had to take care of. And so stairs had to go and the ramps were designed, and luckily we had some very talented people who were able to do that, so we didn't have to hire that sort of detail out. And then the naming of the rooms and all that was fun to be in on. And to be here when one of our members said, we need a new name for our newsletter. And I submit. And it got the vote, and so the Mountain Chalice became our official name for our newsletter. And there were lots of little things that happened that just kind of built up over the years. And it was a gradual sort of thing, and it's had its ups and its downs. But we have survived. My hope for the future was really to become a leading voice for liberal religion in this area. And there are other churches that have some liberal aspects to them, but I think we still are the major one that people come to when they want to do something that's different and out of the ordinary. She said, well, let's go over and ask the Unitarians if we can use their building or if they'd be interested in this kind of program. So we've hosted a lot of nonprofits in their beginning stages because we had that openness and we wanted to spread our gospel in every way we could. And I'm still working on that, trying to get more inclusiveness with others. There are a couple of churches that are very responsive to what we do, and there are others that put up barriers and say, no, we can't do that. So we keep on trying.
Great.
What is the strongest memory you have of your childhood?
It would kind of tie in with the program this morning, which was on naturalism. I had a campfire leader who took me into the fold. My mother was not a joiner of anything, and so I don't know how she found out about it, but she introduced me to Mrs. Wilson. And Mrs. Wilson was very rough-hewn, you might say, but she loved nature, and she would take us out on hikes, and she would get us connected with camp experiences. And so some of my strongest impressions were like getting up in the morning and going out on a morning that we'd had rain the night before, and there were dewdrops on everything, and everything was sparkling, and there was that smell in the air that it's after a rain. You just can't describe it. You can't duplicate it. Those are some of my strongest things, being out in nature and appreciating everything that we had. Yeah.
What would you say are the most significant events in your life?
Significant events back in the middle of Iowa were snowstorms that deposited as much as 5 feet of snow, and being outside and trying to shovel the sidewalk with my father. My mother and I did not bond. I was supposed to have been a boy, and I was supposed to come a year later. And I came early, and I was a girl. And so I never really made a connection with my mother that was very strong. She was a solitary, excellent cook and baker, but she couldn't stand anybody else in the kitchen with her, except for doing dishes and peeling apples for canning season. And so she and I didn't get along that well together. But my father was a different thing. He loved the garden, and so I was out with him planting daffodils in the snow and stuff like that. So I did things with him, and the gardening with him was a strong point of my early childhood. What was the rest of the question? I mean,
Just significant events in your life. So
Okay.
what about in your adulthood? What are some of...
Okay, I think, a significant event was discovering the Unitarian Church, because that opened up a lot of possibilities and really got me started being involved with organizations that were trying to make a change, working for, whether it was working for peace, working for a better world, whatever. But they kind of got me in the volunteer mode. And I've been volunteering ever since. And though I hate to say it, but my children did not get that gene. And so they don't volunteer. So I do it all for them. And at one time I took a check of what I was involved with, and there were 30 different organizations that I was working with every year. You know, there might be just one situation I was with, or another was twice a week or something. So I've put in a lot of time with various organizations, and I still am. I've whittled it down a little bit. I enjoy that, and those become standards that I live by.